Hello, and welcome to Subtle Historian for Sleep. Tonight, our journey takes us back in time to 16th century England, to the turbulent and transformative era of the Tudors. Find a comfortable position and let your body begin to unwind. Allow your shoulders to soften, your hands to rest, and your breathing to find a slow, steady rhythm. The world outside can now fade away, replaced by the flicker of candlelight on stone walls and the scent of wood smoke in the cool, damp air. When we imagine Tudor England, we often picture the grand spectacle of the royal court, King Henry VIII in his finery, or Queen Elizabeth I, resplendent in her jewels. We think of royal intrigue, lavish banquets, and magnificent palaces. But all of that splendor rested upon a vast, unseen foundation. It was a world of ceaseless, invisible labor. Tonight, we will step into that world. We will go below stairs to experience the grueling day-to-day reality of a servant in a great Tudor house. We will then witness the tragic and pivotal final days of Anne Boleyn, a queen whose ambition forever altered the course of the nation. We will delve into a dark and persistent mystery, locked within the infamous Tower of London. And finally, we will emerge into the dazzling public sphere to observe the meticulously crafted daily routine of England, its most celebrated queen. So, take a slow, deep breath. As you exhale, let the present day recede. The candlelight is waiting. Our journey into the heart of the Tudor world is about to begin. Imagine yourself awakening, not to the sun, but to a profound and chilling darkness. You are on a simple straw-filled pallet, perhaps shared with another servant, in a cramped attic or a small, windowless room. The air is cold and damp, a familiar sensation that seems to have settled deep into your bones. The only sounds are the soft breathing of those asleep around you and the distant scuttling of a mouse in the thatch. It is hours before dawn. This is how your day begins. You pull on your coarse woolen clothes and make your way down the narrow, creaking stairs in the near-total blackness. Your first destination is the Great Hall, the heart of the manor house. It is a vast, cavernous space, filled with the long shadows cast by the glowing embers of last night's fire. The air is thick with the smells of old wood smoke, stale ale, and the faint sweet scent of decay from the rushes that cover the floor. Your first task is to bring order to this space. You and another junior servant quietly sweep the old rushes, along with the scraps of food and debris from the previous night's meal, into piles. You then scatter a fresh layer of rushes, perhaps mixed with fragrant herbs like lavender or meadowsweet, a constant but losing battle against the underlying odors of the hall. You wipe down the heavy wooden trestle tables with a damp cloth. Every movement is quiet, measured, so as not to disturb the sleeping household of the master and his family upstairs. From the quiet chill of the hall, you move to the kitchens, and the world changes completely. Here, there is already a hive of activity. The great fireplaces, large enough to roast an entire ox, are roaring, casting a flickering, hellish light and a wave of oppressive heat. The air is a thick stew of smells: baking bread, simmering pottage, wood smoke, and the sweat of hard labor. The sounds are a constant clamor of chopping, grinding, and the sharp commands of the cook. You are at the very bottom of this complex, hierarchical world. Perhaps you are a scullery maid. Your domain is the stone sink, where a seemingly endless mountain of greasy pots, pans, and platters awaits. The water is freezing cold, and you have no soap. Your cleaning tool is a handful of sand or abrasive horsetail reeds. You scrub and scrub until your hands are red, raw, and numb. Or perhaps you are a turnspit. Your station is a small stool set a few feet from the immense heat of the main fire. Your task is to turn the crank that rotates the spit, ensuring the roasting meat cooks evenly. It is a mind-numbingly monotonous job that lasts for hours on end. The heat is scorching, your face flushed and your clothes soaked with sweat, while the rest of the stone-floored kitchen remains drafty and cold. As the morning wears on, you might be called upon to help serve the family's breakfast in the Great Hall. You carry heavy wooden trenchers and pewter flagons of ale. You must be quick, efficient, and above all, invisible. You keep your eyes downcast. You do not speak unless spoken to. A moment of clumsiness, a dropped plate, a spilled drink could earn you a sharp rebuke or a painful slap from the steward. You watch them eat their fill of meat, bread, and cheese, while your own stomach aches with hunger. Your own meal, when it finally comes, is a simple and hurried affair in the servants' end of the hall. It consists of pottage, a thick, unchanging stew of whatever vegetables and grains are available, a chunk of coarse, dark bread, and a mug of small beer, a weak, low-alcohol brew that is safer to drink than the water. Your work does not end after the meal. The day is a relentless cycle of tasks. You might be sent to pluck chickens, to grind spices with a heavy mortar and pestle, to fetch endless buckets of water from the well, or to carry heavy loads of firewood for the many fireplaces of the house. There is no moment of true rest. Your life is one of constant motion, of service to a world of comfort you will never know yourself. As evening falls and the family dines once more, your duties continue. You serve, you clear away, and then you face the mountain of greasy pots and pans all over again. Long after the master and his household have retired to their warm beds, you are still at work, cleaning the kitchen, banking the fires, and preparing for the next day. Finally, you are released. You climb the stairs back to your cold pallet, every muscle in your body aching with a deep and profound weariness. You fall into a heavy, dreamless sleep, knowing that in just a few short hours, the chilling darkness will greet you once more, and the entire, exhausting cycle will begin again. The great houses of Tudor England, with their strict hierarchies of servants, all mirrored the ultimate household, the royal court. And at the center of that court, for a brief and brilliant time, was a woman whose life story was the absolute antithesis of the servants'. The servants' life was one of unchanging, anonymous toil. Hers was a life of dazzling, dangerous, and ultra-brief prominence. Her name was Anne Boleyn. She had achieved what seemed impossible. A mere lady-in-waiting, she had captivated the King of England, Henry VIII, so completely that he had broken with the Catholic Church, divorced his wife of 24 years, and altered the course of his nation's history, all to make her his queen. By the beginning of 1536, she was at the pinnacle of power. She was Queen of England, a champion of the new Protestant faith, and the mother of a princess, Elizabeth. But the foundation of her power was perilously fragile. It rested entirely on the affections of a volatile and increasingly tyrannical king, and on her ability to provide him with what he craved above all else, a male heir. And it was here that the first cracks began to appear. After giving birth to Elizabeth, Anne suffered a series of miscarriages. The final fatal blow came in January of 1536, when she gave birth to a stillborn son. For Henry, this was more than a personal tragedy. It was a sign. In his deeply superstitious mind, it was a sign that God did not approve of their union. His love, which had once moved heaven and earth, began to curdle into resentment. His eyes started to wander, settling upon a quiet, gentle lady-in-waiting named Jane Seymour, a woman who was the complete opposite of the clever, outspoken, and often confrontational. And Anne had also made powerful enemies. Her sharp intellect and political influence had alienated many of the old, conservative nobles at court. The king's chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, who had once been her ally in securing the throne, now saw her as an obstacle to his own ambitions and a threat to the stability of the realm. A powerful faction was coalescing against her, waiting for the king's disenchantment to give them an opening. In the spring of 1536, that opening came. The end, when it arrived, was shockingly swift. It began with the arrest of a court musician, a young man named Mark Smeaton. Under interrogation, and likely torture, he confessed to being the Queen's lover. Then, one by one, other prominent men from Anne's inner circle were arrested. Sir Henry Norris, Sir Francis Weston, William Brereton, and, most shockingly of all, Anne's own beloved brother, George Boleyn. The charges were treasonous and scandalous, adultery with the Queen, and against her brother, the even more unspeakable crime of incest. These accusations were almost certainly a fabrication, a legal pretext carefully engineered by Cromwell to give the king what he now desperately wanted, a way to be rid of his wife. On the 2nd of May, Anne herself was arrested and taken from her palace at Greenwich. She was escorted by barge along the River Thames to the Tower of London. As the barge approached the fortress, she saw that it was heading not for the main entrance, but for the dark, ominous archway of the river gate, known to all as Traitor's Gate. It was a terrible and deliberate piece of symbolism. She fell to her knees in the boat, protesting her innocence to God and to the world. She was imprisoned not in a dungeon, but in the very same royal apartments she had stayed in before her lavish coronation just 3 years earlier. This comfortable confinement was a form of psychological torment. Her jailer reported that she fell into bouts of desperate, hysterical laughter and weeping, alternating with moments of calm, dignified piety. She knew the charges were false, but she also knew that in Henry's England, truth was no defense. Her trial was a mere formality, a piece of grim political theatre, held in the Tower's great hall. The verdict was never in doubt. The court was presided over by her own uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, who, to save himself, read out the guilty verdict and the sentence of death. She listened with composure, defending her honor with eloquence and clarity, but it was futile. In her final days, her marriage to Henry was declared null and void, and her daughter Elizabeth was branded illegitimate. In a gesture he may have perceived as mercy, Henry commuted her sentence from burning at the stake to the more noble death of beheading. He even went to the expense of sending for an expert swordsman from Calais, in France, as a sword was considered a more humane instrument than the common English executioner's axe. On the morning of May 19, 1536, Anne was led to a private execution on Tower Green. She walked with a calm resolve, addressing the small crowd of assembled nobles. In her final speech, she was careful to praise the king, as was the custom, but she did not admit to any guilt. She asked for the prayers of those watching, and entrusted her soul to God. Her ladies removed her ermine cloak and headdress. She knelt, and a single, swift sword stroke ended her life. The queen who had changed the world was gone. 11 days later, King Henry VIII married Jane Seymour. Anne Boleyn's reign had lasted for just over 1,000 days. She was a woman of immense ambition, intelligence, and courage, who flew too close to the dangerous son of an absolute monarch, but her legacy would endure. Her personal quest for a crown was the catalyst for the English Reformation, and the daughter she left behind, the child declared illegitimate and worthless, would one day inherit the throne and become England's greatest queen. The Tower of London, which served as an Ublin's final prison, has been a feature of the English landscape for nearly 1,000 years. It has been a royal palace, a fortress, a treasury, and most famously, a prison. Its ancient stones are saturated with the stories of the powerful who were locked within its walls, but no story is more enigmatic or more sorrowful than the cold and silent mystery of two young boys who, in the summer of 1483, simply vanished. To understand their story, we must step back a few decades before the Tudors, to the final bloody chapters of the Wars of the Roses, the brutal civil war between the rival houses of York and Lancaster for the throne of England. Our story begins with the sudden death of the Yorkist king, Edward IV. In the spring of 1483, his death left a dangerous power vacuum. The heir to the throne was his eldest son, also named Edward, a boy of just 12 years. A child king was always a precarious thing, and the court was a viper's nest of competing ambitions. The most powerful figure in the kingdom was now the late king's younger brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. He was a renowned and loyal soldier, and he was named in his brother's will as Lord Protector, the man who would govern England until his young nephew, now King Edward V, came of age. Richard moved swiftly. He intercepted the young king's party as they travelled towards London for the coronation. He arrested the boy's guardians, members of the powerful Woodville family, the family of the boy's mother. Richard then escorted his nephew to London himself and lodged him in the Tower of London. At first, this was not necessarily seen as sinister. The Tower was a traditional royal residence, and it was customary for a new monarch to stay there while awaiting their coronation. But the situation soon took a darker turn. Richard argued that the young king was unsafe, and for his protection, he had the boy's 9-year-old brother, also named Richard, brought from sanctuary to join him in the Tower. The two princes were now together, under their uncle's complete control. With both heirs secured, Richard made his shocking move. He had it declared from the pulpits of London that his late brother's marriage to the boy's mother, Elizabeth Woodville, had been invalid. If the marriage was not legitimate, then their children were illegitimate, with no legal claim to the throne. The path was now clear. With his nephews officially removed from the line of succession, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, was declared the rightful heir. He accepted the crown and became King Richard III. The two young boys, no longer a king and a prince, remained in the Tower. For a time, they were seen playing in the gardens, their public appearances becoming less and less frequent. Then, sometime in the late summer of 1483, they were seen no more. They vanished from the sight of the world, and from the historical record. What happened to them has become one of the most enduring mysteries in English history. The traditional story, the one immortalized by William Shakespeare, places the blame squarely on their uncle, King Richard III. The motive was clear and compelling. As long as the two boys lived, they were a potential threat, a living symbol around which his enemies could rally a rebellion. To secure his throne, they had to disappear. But Richard is not the only suspect. 2 years after the princes vanished, Richard III was defeated and killed in battle by a Lancastrian claimant, Henry Tudor, who then became King Henry VII, the first of the Tudor monarchs. Some have argued that Henry may have had the princes disposed of, as their claim to the throne was, in fact, stronger than his own. However, Henry's claim to fame was ending the tyranny of Richard III, and if the boys were alive, he surely would have produced them to further blacken Richard's name. A third suspect is the Duke of Buckingham, Richard's powerful right-hand man, who later rebelled against him. Perhaps Buckingham acted on his own, thinking it would please the king, or perhaps he had his own ambitions. We will likely never know. For nearly 200 years, the mystery remained just a story. Then, in 1674, during renovation work inside the tower, a team of workmen demolishing a staircase in the White Tower made a startling discovery. They found a wooden chest, and inside it, the small skeletons of 2 children. By order of the reigning king, Charles II, these bones were assumed to be those of the lost princes. They were placed in a marble urn and solemnly interred at Westminster Abbey, where they remain to this day. Scientific examinations in the 20th century confirmed that the skeletons belonged to 2 children of approximately the right ages, but the science of the time could not prove their identities, nor the cause of their deaths. And so, the mystery endures. The Tower of London, which saw the brief triumph and tragic end of Anne Boleyn, keeps this older, colder secret locked within its stones. We are left with biased chronicles written by Richard's enemies, a web of circumstantial evidence, and a quiet marble urn in a royal abbey. The fate of the 2 young princes remains a dark and sorrowful question mark at the very dawn of the Tudor age. From the dark mysteries of the past and the tragic fates of her predecessors, we now emerge into the dazzling, highly ordered world of the woman who would come to define the age. Queen Elizabeth I. She was the daughter of the condemned Anne Boleyn, the Tudor heir whose legitimacy was once declared void. Her very survival was a testament to her intelligence and caution, and her reign would be a masterclass in the performance of power. To understand a day in her life is to understand that her existence was not her own. She was the Virgin Queen, symbolically married to her kingdom, and her daily routine was not a private schedule, but a series of public rituals designed to project majesty, stability, and divine right. Every moment was a performance, and the entire nation was her audience. Her day began in the hushed, opulent bedchamber of the royal palace. This awakening was a ceremony in itself, witnessed by her most senior and trusted ladies. The Queen would emerge from a magnificent 4-poster bed, hung with heavy embroidered curtains of silk and velvet, to begin the long and elaborate process of transforming from a private woman into a public icon. This transformation, her daily toilette, could take 2 to 3 hours. It was a meticulous construction of the royal image. First came the layers of clothing each placed upon her by her ladies. A fine linen chemise, a rigid corset of wood or whalebone called, stays a large bell-shaped hoop skirt, known as a farthingale, and then finally, the kirtle and the magnificent gown itself, made of the most expensive velvet or silk, intricately embroidered with pearls and gold thread. An enormous, starched rough wood frame her face, a symbol of extreme status. Then came the face itself. To achieve the pale complexion fashionable at the time, her face was painted with a thick, white cosmetic called ceaseless, a toxic mixture of white lead and vinegar that slowly poisoned the skin. Her lips and cheeks were colored with a red stain, and her eyes were lined to make them stand out. When the final jewel was in place, the transformation was complete. The mortal woman was gone, and the eternal, unchanging image of the Queen was ready to meet her day. Her first public duty was to attend a service in the Chapel Royal. This was not merely a personal devotion, it was a critical political act. As the Supreme Governor of the Church of England, her attendance was a visible reaffirmation of the Protestant faith and her role as its defender. The music, the prayers, the sermonal of it reinforced the divine order upon which her rule was based. From the chapel, she would proceed to a meeting with her Privy Council, the small group of her most trusted advisers, men like her Chief Minister, William Cecil. Here, in the council chamber, the performance of majesty gave way to the hard work of governance. Elizabeth was a sharp, shrewd, and often formidable politician. She would listen to reports, debate matters of foreign policy, scrutinize state expenses, and issue her commands. She was the only woman at a table of the most powerful men in England, and she ruled them with a keen intellect and an often intimidating wit. The main meal of the day, dinner, served around noon, was another piece of elaborate state theatre. The Queen would sit alone at a high table in the presence chamber, while the court looked on. A grand procession of nobles would carry the dishes from the kitchens in a solemn ceremony. The food was presented to her on bended knee, tasted for poison by an official, and placed before her. She often ate very little. The purpose of the meal was not sustenance, but the spectacle of the monarch being served, a visible display of the kingdom's bounty and its unwavering loyalty to the crown. The afternoon was often for diplomacy. Elizabeth would give audiences to foreign ambassadors, another performance on a different stage. She was a gifted linguist and could switch effortlessly between French, Italian, Spanish, and Latin, dazzling and often disarming her visitors. She used her famously lavish wardrobe and magnificent jewels to project an image of immense wealth and power, sending a clear message about the strength of her kingdom. Even her leisure was a form of political communication. She was an excellent and fearless horsewoman, and would ride for hours, a display of the physical energy and stamina that reassured her subjects of her fitness to rule. She loved music and was a skilled musician herself, and in the evenings, the court would be filled with dancing, plays sometimes by a promising young playwright named Shakespeare, and intricate masks, all designed to create a culture of sophisticated and dazzling royal power. Her life was the absolute inverse of the servants'. The servants' existence was one of ceaseless physical labor and utter invisibility. The Queen's life was one of constant, exhausting performance, where every word, every gesture, and every gown was a carefully calculated political statement. She had inherited a divided and unstable kingdom, and with meticulous care, she spent every day of her long life performing the role of the infallible monarch who would make it strong. And so, our time in the world of the Tudors draws to a close. We have felt the bone-deep weariness of the servant, living an invisible life of ceaseless labor in the cold, dark halls of a great house. We have witnessed the swift and tragic downfall of Anne Boleyn, a queen whose ambition bought her a crown, but cost her her life. We have stood before the cold stone walls of the Tower, pondering the silent, unsolved fate of two young princes, and we have observed the magnificent, daily performance of Queen Elizabeth I, a monarch who bound her kingdom together through the sheer force of her will and the power of her image. From the scullery to the throne room, Tudor England was a world of profound contrasts, yet it was bound by a rigid and unyielding order. The servant's life was a cycle of toil, the Queen's a cycle of ritual. One was a life of invisibility, the other a life of constant, unrelenting scrutiny. But both, in their own way, were lives of service, one to a lord of the manor, the other to the very idea of England itself. It was an age of exquisite art and poetry, but also one of brutal politics and sudden reversals of fortune, a world where one's place was everything, and that place was never truly secure. But that world of candlelight and stone has now faded. The great halls have fallen silent, the fires have burned down to embers, and the intrigues of the court are now just stories for a quiet evening. The struggles, the ambitions, and the sorrows of the Tudors are over. It is time now for your own day to come to a peaceful end. You are not on a cold straw pallet, nor are you burdened by the heavy weight of a crown. The demands of that distant world are not your own. There are no more duties to perform tonight. There is only the stillness of your room and the comfort of your bed. Let the silence of those ancient halls bring you a deep and profound peace. Let the echoes of their stories gently fade, leaving only quiet in their place. Rest now, sleep well,